that is my brother. My brother just got out of a 6-month sentence in the federal prison system in St. Joseph, Missouri. And as soon as my brother got out of jail, the first bit of news he heard about is that one of his best friends had been murdered and dumped in a river. They haven't found his killers. My brother was troubled by that, but at the same time he went back to the same people, to the same relationships, to the same attitude that he'd always had before. The Bible talks about patterns. In fact, in Proverbs 26:11, this is what the word says. It says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. You will always go back to being the same person that you were unless you choose to allow the Holy Spirit to change you. It doesn't matter how God speaks to us in moments like this. We can come into chapel and spiritual emphasis and come to youth service tonight, and God can speak to us. We can love it. We can be so excited about God, and then we go back to the same vomit, the same junk, the same fear, the same pain, the same heartache and frustration. Why? Because we are people of patterns and habits, and unless changed, we will go back to being the people that we were. Your folly is a rut. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. Your folly is a rut. In the Old West, back at the turn of the century, roads were built on raised wooden platforms in West Texas and New Mexico and Las Vegas, Nevada, and in Arizona. They were all built on raised wooden platforms. Every now and then you would find yourself out in the middle of the desert driving along in your little Model T, driving as far as you could, and then all of a sudden you would meet another car. So the car in front of you had to figure out, do I back up or do you back up? What do you do? Because there were no places to pull off of the wooden ramps. And so in some places you would have to back up as far as 25 miles to get to a place where you could pull your car off the road. And so they began to do away with wooden platforms, and they just began to have dirt roads out in the middle of nowhere. In my research for this message, I found out about a sign that they put on the road one day. There was a sign that said, pay attention, because there's going to be a rut. There's going to be a rut in the road, and if you let your tire fall into the rut, you won't be able to get out for 25 miles. In other words, the rut would last for 25 miles, and unless you choose to avoid the rut before you get there, you will fall into it, and you will not be able to escape by yourself. See, the truth of the matter is very simple. That your patterns and habits that are not of God are like ruts that you fall back into time and time again. And if you do not allow the Holy Spirit, God, to change you so that you can avoid the ruts and the patterns, you will fall back into the same person that you were before this week began, and the same person that you were a year ago will be the same person that you choose to be tomorrow. God has not called you to be the same over and over. He has called you to live a life that is holy before God. A life and a pattern and habits that are holy and righteous before God. See, God has called us to leadership. And that's the reason that you're here this morning. Not because you're made to be here. Not because you come to this high school. But because God has called you to leadership. And a good leader cannot return to the same patterns. Did you know that habits are not formed overnight? They say that it takes 21 days to form a new habit. So what you choose to do differently today will not be changed for 21 days from now. So let's imagine for just a moment. I don't like the way that I walk. Remember, anybody not like the way that you walk? Anybody in the room, you're like, I don't like the way I walk. It's weird. Anybody? There we go. Thank you for being honest. And some of you are just liars. So, I don't like the way that I walk, so I'm going to change the way that I walk. From now on, it's going to be my military style. I'm going to walk like this. Isn't this intimidating? If you were to see somebody walk in the room and they were like, you know good well you would get out of the way. There's no way you're going to be like, hi, look at the dude. If it came up to you like this, you'd be like, what are you doing? It's intimidating. And so I'm going to start walking like this for the rest of my life. Did you know that if I'm going to maintain this pattern, I've got to do it every time I walk for the next 21 days? I have to do it when I wake up in the morning and I walk to brush my teeth. I've got to do it when I walk out to my car. I've got to walk lifting my legs as long as I walk for the next 21 days before it ever becomes a pattern or a habit. Because if I choose to get tired of trying to maintain this habit, it will eventually not become habit anymore. When we try to live for God, what we do is we live for God for a while, we get passionate for a little while, and then somewhere along the way we stop to take a break from righteous, holy, God-fearing living so that we can take a little bit of sin, or a little bit of pain, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of gossip. And then before we know it, we're right back to forming the habit that we were not the habit that God is forming us to be. Maintain discipline. You have to ask yourself a question. What are your goals in life? Joe, what's one of your main goals in life? What do you want to do with yourself? What year are you? What year are you? Okay, you get some time. Any seniors? Oh, where are my seniors? Right there. What do you want to do with your life? Yes, girl, lady. Yep.
Go to college.
Go to college for the rest of your life. What?
It's a portion of my life.
Right. What do you want to do after college? Do you have a goal for like career?
Teach.
Teach. Awesome. What was yours? That's phenomenal. Absolutely. What if we have goals in life? Maybe your goal is you love McDonald's and you want to spend the rest of your life flipping burgers because you love the smell of grease. Maybe you want to dig ditches for the rest of your life, and whenever you hold the shovel, you're like, there's something powerful about a shovel. I'm going to dig with the shovel. And I'm going to dig ditches from Springfield all the way to Chicago, and it's going to be amazing. Maybe that is your goal. You have no clue about what God has called you to, or maybe you actually want to do something significant for God. If you want to do something significant for God, then there are certain habits and patterns that must be formed for you to become the person God is asking you to be. As Gavin comes back to the keyboard, God never requires people to rise to leadership in life. God will never require you to be a leader in this world. But what God will do is He will present a challenge in front of you and then ask you to rise to the level of leadership that the challenge requires. Seniors and juniors, I want you to listen carefully. You are called to be examples to everyone below you. Every student who's a sophomore, every student who's a freshman, to the 8th graders, you are called to be examples of leadership. And if you will not be the example of leadership that God has called you to be, then leadership will not be a part of your personality. You won't lead anyone. You will simply be a follower. You're not called to be a follower. 6 things that every leader needs. 1, humility. You need to be humble in your life and humble before God. You need humility, not to believe that you're amazing, but to believe that the God inside of you is amazing. You need grace. Grace in the bad situations and grace in the bad circumstances. Not to get angry at the drop of a hat, but to say, God, I can make it through this situation. I know that it's frustrating, but I can make it through this situation. Number 3, you need courage. There's a difference between courage and bravery. Bravery can run into a burning building to rescue a child. But courage can run into a dying world to rescue the nations. You have to be courageous to be successful with God. 4, you need integrity. Do you know the definition for integrity? Integrity is given by me. Doing the same thing in public that you do in private. Being the same person out here in the cafeteria. Being the same person that you are here, that you will always be behind closed doors or when you walk into your house. If you tell people that you're amazing and you love God, but every time you walk into your house, you start laying into your mom and into your dad, there is not integrity in that situation. You are called to be filled with integrity before God. Number 5, you're called to be transparent. The world is not looking for Christians that are hidden and that are obtuse. The world is looking for Christians that are transparent so that the world can see you as you follow God just the way that God has called you to be. To live a life that is holy so that the world notices there's something different about you. And number 6, you're called to listen. Mike, what's your favorite word?
Swag.
Plaque?
Swag.
I was like, plaque, nice. On your teeth. Carter, what's your favorite word? Do you have a favorite word? Okay. Poor Carter, he just lied to me. I could probably go around the room and ask every single one of you what your favorite word is, and most of you wouldn't guess that your favorite word is your own name. Did you know that the sweetest sound, the sweetest word to anybody in this room is the sound of their own name? We love to hear our own name, even if we think our name is not the coolest name in the world. Maybe not even the coolest name in the business. We love to hear our own name because when somebody says Ike or Carter, somebody says Joe, somebody says Taylor, somebody says Ashley, we love the sound of our own name because we think that when somebody says our name, they're actually listening to me. They've spent enough time listening to what I say. You, as leaders, are called to listen to people who are broken. It's time that you move beyond being selfish and looking at your own life and saying it's about me. Because did you know that it's not always about you? Sometimes it's about people in your family, in your world, and your friends that are broken and that are hurting. Listen to hear the sound of what they love, the sweetest sound. Listen to know them. In World War II, there was a small village in the south of France that became so unique that it caught the attention of American journalist by the name of Philip Hale. Philip Hale, after the war was over, decided to visit this small village in the south of France because he'd heard how different it was. The Holocaust took place during World War II when 6 million Jews were slaughtered because of their belief by the Nazis. But this village was different. Most villages in that part of Europe were giving up their Jewish population. They were throwing them out to the wolves and saying, we know where they are, come and get them, so that they wouldn't lose their own life. This village was different. This village protected their families. They protected their population. They didn't hide them, but they protected them. Sometimes they would even help them escape. Sometimes when the Nazis would get ready to run into the town, they would help them escape out into the woods and even give them food and clothing until the coast was clear and they could come all the way back home. So Philip Hale went to this small village and he decided to do research and to try to figure out what was so different about this village. Why they were so willing to love and to not hate and to protect instead of give up. He heard a story about a woman. This elderly woman, one day she was walking through the middle of the village. She saw that a Nazi regiment was walking into the village and she didn't know what to do. She knew that there were still some Jews in the town. And so instead of running to find the Jews and to throw them to the Nazis, she stood in the middle of the village and she faked a heart attack. She fell on the ground and put her hand on her chest and pretended like she was having a heart attack. And then some of the village members ran to her aid and some of the Nazi soldiers even ran to see what was the problem. And then when she hoped that the coast was clear, she stood up, saying that everything was okay. Why would her and so many people in this village be willing to protect people that weren't their next of kin or their closest family members? After weeks of research, Philip came to the conclusion that every single person in this town went to the same church. Every person in this town went to the same church and they heard the same messages by the same pastor for weeks and months. This pastor had eventually come to the conclusion that life was what saved people. That it wasn't hate, that it wasn't fear, but life, freedom, Christ saved people. And eventually the people of the town began to buy into his message. They began to say, you know what? It's right. We shouldn't throw our Jews to the Nazis. We should protect them. We should keep them. We should wrap our arms around them and tell them that they're loved and that we care about them. And so they protected them because they listened to the words of a man who believed that, like Jesus, he was called to bring freedom and not bondage, not slavery. The truth is, everybody listening for just one more moment, the truth is that there has to come a time in your life when nobody has to tell you what to do. As Christian teenagers, there's got to be a point in your life when nobody has to say, this is how you respond when you're being tempted to sleep with your girl. There has to be a moment when it says, this is how you respond when you're being tempted to smoke that weed. This is how you respond when you're being tempted to get angry and to gossip. This is how you respond when you're tempted to look at porn. Every now and then, you will be tempted. But unless you're living a life that pours out and passionately pursues God, you will fall back into the same pattern, the same rut, the same habit. At some point, following God means that nobody has to tell you what to do or how to act or how to live, because you know and you make the right decisions because you love Jesus